this is not a prescriptive solution.
Yeah.
It is different for every company. Some companies who really need visibility into a particular thing. For example, we needed a lot of visibility into our administrative actions on our cloud. So one of the things we decided was like, hey, AWS needs to be number 1 or number 2 or number 3 because that's where most of our stuff lives. And we just need to know what's happening. Some teams might say, hey, we need, I don't know, Cloudflare or like network logs. That might be something which they want to focus on.
Hello, welcome to another episode of Cloud Security Podcast. I've got Geet with me. Hey man, thanks for coming to the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
Maybe to set some context, if you can share a bit about yourself, your professional journey, and we can start there.
Yeah, sounds good. I'm Geet Pradhan, obviously you know that. I'm a senior security engineer at Lime. For those who don't know what Lime is, we are a micromobility company. We have electric scooters, electric bikes. It's more for like short-term rentals. Do check us out. We're really cool, but be safe about when you use Lime.
Wear a helmet.
Yeah, definitely wear a helmet. Definitely do that. Prior to this, I worked for Aon Cyber Solutions as a security consultant, doing a bit of DFIR, doing a bit of advisory and some testing.
Yeah.
And yeah, I just really enjoy cyber. I think it's a pretty interesting and cool thing to do, especially when people just ask you like, oh, do you know how to hack stuff? Maybe not, but I think there's just more to cyber than that.
100%. And maybe just to take that DFIR lenses a bit more as well, I think we're going to talk a bit more about that topic, but I guess I want to set the plane a bit more for what DFIR is today in the context of cloud and the different kind of complexity different organizations have. How do you define detection response today in your experience?
Oh, that's a great question. And one of the ways that I do, the most simplest answer is I think detection response or security operations or SecOps is one of the cornerstones of security right now.
Yeah.
Like detection response, essentially, okay, you need to be able to identify what is going wrong or anomalous or just something weird in your environment.
Yeah.
And then responding to it.
Yeah.
Essentially, like, it is the cornerstone of security, in my opinion, because everything that we do is, hey, something's going wrong and you need to fix it.
Yeah.
You know, what if you have some products to fix it, if you have services, or if you have people. But like, it is one of the cornerstones, and I think it's an interesting domain because with the complexity of when you went from on-premise to cloud, now we have another threat vector with AI, and you need to identify different attack patterns on how it's deployed internally or externally.
Yeah.
It just keeps changing, but the concept is as simple as, hey, you need to identify what's weird and what's not normal.
Yeah.
And respond to it. And the response can be as complex as we want, can be as simple as we want, but at the crux of it, it's just as simple as that.
Yeah, and it's also more challenging as a one person doing everything else as well.
Oh, yeah.
So how does it become challenging as a one-man unit or one-woman unit or one team? Also, what I'm trying to think of a word where holding the fort for the entire security.
The superstars that we have. So I'm thankful that I am not the only person on my security team.
Yeah.
We have 4 or 5 engineers who are really good and have skill sets in different things. And the way that we have designed our SecOps pipeline right now is a lot of people can provide that immediate triage, provide that response with a little bit of context, right? Mm-hmm. I'm not going to say it's not tough. We're still scratching the surface. There's so much to do. There's so many different sources. And again, being in a company which does like physical products as well as the software side, there's just a lot of things which we haven't covered yet. And it's not a why have you not covered it? It's simply, we're getting to it.
Yeah.
We decided to tackle some of the top tier or our kind of tier 1 applications or tier 1 systems based on not just our priority, but also business's priority. And we're navigating and moving through that. Building that detection response pipeline was from scratch. So essentially designing that. And the talk I actually gave in B-Sides was things that I learned, right? Like I know that there would have been some things that I've done better, some things that I did pretty well, but now at this stage, going back, hey, this is what I would have done differently. And it's interesting because one of the things that I now want to do is go back and redesign it because there are some institutional issues that came up with that pipeline right now, which I would not have seen. And as we decide to scale and add the complexity, I think it might even make sense to go back to the drawing board. Maybe not rip everything apart, but add some things here and there to make it a bit more scalable.
So as someone who was building the pipeline from ground ground zero, what was something about the traditional methods that don't apply in a cloud world that you found as you were building the detection response pipeline? Or maybe even one step further, how do you define detection response pipeline? Because I think a lot of people won't even think like that. So How do you define that, and what does that mean in the cloud context?
Yeah. So I'll take the first question first, right? How do you define a detection response pipeline? It can be simplified to be like, hey, what are your log sources? From your log sources, do you have any sort of alerting, any sort of event set up to identify when something is going wrong or weird or whatever word you want to use, right? Once you have those sources, once you have what you want to alert on, then what do you do like after that? You have to notify the team to actually perform the actions of response, right? As I said previously, it's as simple as identifying something that's wrong and responding to it. So in the most basic, like bare shell solution of a detection response pipeline, it's that.
Yeah.
Obviously, there's more complexity to it with, hey, once you add more sources, there's more alerts, there's alert fatigue, there's noise, false positives. But the easiest answer I would give to that is you need to be able to set up a way to ingest your logs or ingest your events.
Yep.
From those events, identify, hey, what is malicious or anomalous or something which it doesn't make sense, it doesn't add up. And then from there, you have to just make sure you give that information to the people who can actually triage it, respond to it, and just take a look at it with a finer lens.
The end-to-end flow of the entire process, yes. So
Correct.
Is there a SIEM playing a role in there as well? Do you have log aggregators and all of that?
Yeah, so going back to what we did, yes, I was lucky enough to be given a paid SIEM solution. There are some open source options out there as well, but we got a pretty good SIEM product. And from there, it was very easy to set up some of the detection pipeline. Right? At that time, we had identified, hey, what are the log sources that we have and what can we ingest straight away? Some things like for example, Okta, Google, they have direct API connections to our SIEM. So we didn't have to think about a janky way to figure out where the log sources are. But there is a particular log source, so GitHub. It's not the worst, but it's not the easiest. So what we did we worked with the infrastructure team who handles or owns GitHub internally, and we set up a kind of export pipeline essentially to put those logs into a particular bucket and then have my SIEM, and I think most SIEMs are pretty good at this, kind of read from that bucket, right? It took a little bit of time and definitely a great learning experience, but it's not hard, but it's definitely not easy when there's no direct connection to the SIEM. And from there, all the sources are in the SIEM. Ideally, in an ideal situation, all your log sources are being ingested by the SIEM. Once it's there, you can add complexity and you can add your detection rules there. I would like to talk about like maybe not adding them in the SIEM and the benefits for that and why I found it better to manage the rules myself instead of into a platform. And then just from there, having that, hey, okay, my SIEM has all these log sets. There's individual alerts set up for maybe one log set, maybe multiple log sets together. And then just giving that information to people. And one of the biggest learnings on that second half was that we're in a remote workforce, everyone's not on their laptop all the time. I don't want to have to log into my SIEM app to see an alert every single time. I would prefer it if I get it in a different format. For example, what we do is we use Slack internally, we use email internally, we have other notifications and messaging solutions that we have. We decided to take a step of, hey, I want to get that to those messages because even if I'm traveling from A to B and I just want to see what's happening, I can just open up my phone and see very easily, okay, there's something, and if something needs my attention, I can just go back and open up my laptop and see it.
And would you say that as you explore that a bit more in terms of building that detection response pipeline, what kind of log sources are easy to take out from, so a lot of people are almost always overwhelmed by the where do I start question. And the reason I specifically called out that you may not have a huge team, you're an individual trying to build the entire detection response pipeline, starting from scratch of, okay, I've identified log sources, AWS log sources, GitHub, GitLab, everything. Now I put it into a SIEM. Traditionally, and this guy was asking from earlier, traditionally we would just prefer to have it in a SIEM because quote unquote agnostic. But I'm curious to know from your perspective, why was your active choice to not keep that in SIEM? And obviously I get Slack notification became your thing. But is that because of scalability as well, perhaps? Or is it just more that you can add a lot more context if it comes into a messaging system?
That's a good question. So we actually did it the same way that everyone would do it, right? We were like, hey, it's in the SIEM. We'll just push those messages to whatever notification platform. Directly. Now, what I learned there is I needed to log into the SIEM every time.
Oh, yeah.
Now, as we're a remote workforce, I'm based in London. My team is in the US. We have folks in the East as well. Our operations are global, right?
Yeah.
We were just talking about that.
Yeah.
What I didn't like is, hey, I cannot always log into the SIM, and it's annoying sometimes, right? At the crux of it, I didn't want to always have to open up my laptop if I just wanted to see something.
Yeah.
And in a remote workforce, there's some trust. You have to have some trust. And I think the ability to give my team just the action of saying, hey, you have your phone with you all the time. If there is something that needs your attention, you can just take a look at it. I'll tag you. And if you have a ready answer for that, for adding that context, because most people do. Most people know that, okay, this seems weird to you initially, but this is expected behavior, right?
Yeah.
They can just tell you over the message, and you don't have to go back into the platform, investigate each and every suspicious activity that you see.
Yeah.
And it's just easier when you're building out that, hey, every single thing does not need to be explored, right? And that is something which I think was a hard learning for me, because when I started, I was like, oh, I have to have my laptop open all the time. I have to be online 24/7. And as an unrealistic expectation in security and in SecOps specifically, that you have to always be on.
Yeah.
There is a side to it which you do, but I think another learning which I had is, hey, if you build your pipeline in a way which is smart and kind of caters to you, what your standard processes, not just as a company and as your team look like, but in your life, like you need to understand that your team cannot always be online. And even if you expect them to always be online, they might be driving the kids to work one day, or they might have their laptop with them if they're on call or whatnot. But it's just easier to get a first indication on their phone before actually having to run to their laptop and open it. And I think that was a decision that all of us agreed upon, saying, hey, this seems like a much smarter idea. And some of the other teams were already doing that. For like the SRE infra team was already doing that when we saw success there, especially being a distributed workforce. That did help.
Would you say that, I guess I understand the motivation behind this as well, but I also feel a lot of people who are probably starting off in a project, like they'll hear you talk at B-sides, they'll just go, okay, sounds like a good idea. I have a paid SIEM, I can do log aggregation. Okay, I understand I cannot always be online, so I need to find easier ways to access information if I wanted to check something. In terms of, I guess, the kind of alerts to start with, we were talking about CloudTrail earlier, and by default, a lot of people just go, okay, make sure, like even AWS recommendation is, hey, have your AWS CloudTrail turned on. That's the first thing you need to make sure. Have your CloudWatch turned on, S3 access log turned on, every Tom, Dick, and Harry log that you can find on the AWS environment, turn all of that shit on. And now you're like going, okay, as a person who has to see through, for lack of a better word, across the entire ecosystem, we're not just talking one AWS account, it'll be hundreds of AWS accounts. Where's a good point to start, and what are some of the log sources that you recommend people must have as a starting point?
That's a fantastic question. And obviously, one of the things that I do preach is, hey, this is not a prescriptive solution. It is different for every company. Some companies who really need visibility into a particular thing. For example, we needed a lot of visibility into our administrative actions on our cloud. So one of the things we decided was like, hey, AWS needs to be number 1 or number 2 or number 3, because that's where most of our stuff lives, and we just need to know what's happening. Some teams might say, hey, we need, I don't know, Cloudflare or like network logs. That might be something which they want to focus on. These are all correct answers. I don't think I can ever say, no, you're wrong. The one thing that we did, and I think we should have done a bit better, and in hindsight, if I have to do it again, I would do that, is I would whiteboard what are these log sources. If you're building a detection pipeline from scratch, there is a pretty high chance you don't know. You don't have visibility into every single source, which is a different problem, which is a problem that we also faced. And I'm sure there's a lot of companies that are facing this, because there's products which are identifying shadow SaaS, shadow IT. So there's a business for that. That means there are companies who are actually experiencing day-to-day. We do as well. Not as much as we used to anymore. We fixed that as much as we could. But the first thing is just identify what does your company do? What are the applications that are used? And that is a big task. It's not going to be done by only you. You're going to have to work with your teams, right? Maybe you have to work with your skip level. Maybe you have to work with your sister teams. You need to just talk. Like one of the things which you also need to do in security, which I always talk about, is like, hey, you need to be friends with everyone. Because they're going to think of you as the police. You need to change that. There's actually a really cool talk in B-Sides by Nate Lee about the power of persuasion. If you can link that.
I will leave that.
He actually talks about how if you want someone to do something, you should do something for them. And you just need to be friends
Yep.
with your team. When you're friends with your team, you will get the answers that you need.
Yep.
So what we did is we were like, okay, what are the applications that we can touch? At that time, it was obviously nascent stages of a security team, and this was 3 years ago, so there was a lot of mess. One thing that me and another engineer, we were thinking about doing is, hey, we're very close to our infra team because we're like a spin-off from them. Like our manager was the same, but we're still in there. And we were like, okay, let's just start with them. Let's not go to the IT side. Let's not go to the other product team side yet. Let's start with this because infrastructure visibility is a big thing. So then we were like, okay, let's take these. One thing I would have done a little differently is I would have taken the business use case. So most companies have some sort of compliance that's going on in their company.
Yeah.
Something,
Yeah.
PCI, HIPAA, the one, and there's always a list of those applications. So I would say find the person who's doing this because they've already done the hard part for you. They've already identified the systems or the applications or the resources in scope.
And the log sources as well.
And if not the log sources specifically, hey, okay, GitHub is in scope for this particular compliance effort. So then you know that, okay, you use GitHub, right? If you didn't know, that would be a different problem in itself. But for example, Workday is in scope, or I don't know, any other HR platform that you have. That gives you A, visibility into what we're doing, and B, and most importantly, it gives you the prioritization framework. So then you're like, okay, if there's a compliance issue, that means if anything goes wrong, we're going to get affected. And there's always a, hey, is it security first? Is it compliance first? Again, they're both right. With my experience and just knowing what we're doing right now and what other companies are doing right now, I would always say, hey, if there's going to be an intersection between them for sure. If there's cross-functional impact, if that system gets breached or gets popped, or just gets screwed up, basically. Prioritize that.
Interesting. And sounds like there's a softer, not soft skill, but I was thinking more for a cultural perspective, a question to be asked as well, because as much as you may have the right intent, you've heard Geet talk about this at B-sides, and I'm talking about people who are watching or listening to this, they might go, you know what, that's exciting, man. I think I should do the same. I should make friends with my infra people, blah, blah. There is a whole security culture thing to be spoken about here as well. What was your experience and what have you found it to be? And I guess maybe it goes back to your persuasion thing as well. But I'm curious to hear, how'd you go with the organization security culture?
How long do you have? It's a challenge, right? Whoever you ask, I'm sure you've seen it everywhere. It's the same as us. Now, security is never the first hire. If it is, please introduce me to the people who are doing that because I would love to meet them. So security is never the first hire, or never the first 10, 20. So something's already built out. So there's already a culture there. Now, a lot of security adds complexity and adds a step. One thing I realized is, hey, very basic, like product teams want to ship code, ship features. We add a complexity saying, oh, maybe you don't do that. Maybe you don't just like basic meme example, push to prod. Maybe we don't do that. It interrupts what they're currently doing. It interrupts on their velocity. It interrupts on multiple of their metrics. So you're basically making their life harder. One big thing that I learned in my previous role is security impact or security goals are not always equal to business goals, not always equal to cross-functional goals. So this is where I go back to, hey, you need to understand the problem. You cannot just say, oh, no, you cannot do this without really understanding what it is they do and why they do it. One big example of a behavioral change that we did is we spoke to the teams. Literally, we spoke to the teams. They were pushing to prod because they thought it's fine. It's not that important a repository. It's okay. And when we simply had a conversation with them, they were like, oh, dude, this is bad. Thanks for telling us. There's a fundamental, and I think it's preached or spoken about. It's called, hey, don't say no. Internally, me and the rest of our team, we have a mindset of saying, hey, let's not say no. We'll say yes and. So you want to do something? Yes, sure. We're not gonna say no. But if you want to do it, here's guardrail 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So in the context of cloud, we were like, hey, the team wanted to deploy a couple of S3 buckets. And they were like, yeah, we want all the permissions. This role has to have all the permissions here. We wanted to do everything, list, put. We were like, okay, cool. We're not going to stop you creating the S3 bucket, but, or yes, and you have to have these guardrails. So do you really need a put object permission? Maybe you need a get and list. Sure, that's fine. But do you need to put object? They were like, oh, maybe not. Actually, you're right. Cool. And that was it, right?
Yep.
Another good thing for us in my company is that a lot of the things were through code. So we could just insert ourselves as a code owner. And that is the complexity that they add. They had to be like, hey, as a code owner, can you review this and approve it? Sometimes you do have to approve things, and it also depends on the individuals. So I was having a conversation with some of the team members just yesterday at B-Sides who were there, and he actually said a really cool thing. He's like, hey, so I spoke about security champions, and I know that's a big word out there, but essentially it's just security forward-minded people in your company. They don't need to do cool stuff, and they don't need to have a security hat on always, but you have to identify the people who are open to change. Those people are the ones who are going to help you. You cannot change the behavior of the whole team straight away. It's much easier if you have someone on the inside, and I sound very cool saying this, you have to find that someone on the inside. And if you find that person, it just makes it a lot easier. So what we did, and this is not just for SecOps, right? It's security culture as a whole. Something as small as, hey, if they ever create a PR, approve it immediately, or within reason, but respond to that request soon. So then that builds like, okay, I'm doing this for you. And this is, again, going back to Nate's talk, it's like they think that they owe you something. Not always big, not always small, but okay, you're doing this for them, you're building that relationship. And then because of that, when you ask for something, saying, hey, can you help me spread the word about this? Or we have a concept of RFCs, right? Where we need to comment, where we need to be like, hey, we don't approve, we do approve, is what you need. That helped us in saying, okay, maybe now we start being a bit more aggressive and saying, I don't approve this anymore. I said yes, but maybe not. You need to do 1, 2, 3, 4. And that really helped. So you have to build those interpersonal connections. And it doesn't have to be you doing all of that. If you have team members, split up the work, right? For example, we have someone doing AppSec now. And he is writing a lot of code. He's deploying our AppSec pipeline or expanding it and scaling it. So he deals a lot with our actual developers. So he's already maintaining that relationship. So what he's doing is, okay, I will tackle this, right? In my current role, my current project, I'm dealing a lot with strategy and talking to folks who are cross-functional leaders, right? So I'm trying to build that rapport with them, with the risk team, saying, hey guys, here's my risk register. It's very janky because I'm not the expert. Here's a gift for you. And that's just building a rapport. Does anything have to come out of it? No. But it helps if you're friends, right? And that's, I think, one of the biggest learnings in security that I have. SecOps, non-SecOps, that's something which I think is pretty cool.
And I guess to your point, security culture kind of goes a long way in making things easier as well as you go and deploy it. Fair. And maybe, because we spoke about log sources and the easy way to find it, we also spoke about the pipeline and as to where that or how that can help build something. Are there any, I'm just going to go with examples of alerts or detection responses that are good starting points? Because what would be some of the examples for that?
Luckily, the security community is pretty cool. One thing when I was researching this, I was like, oh gosh, do I have to pull out the documentation from all these log sources, pull out all their audit logs, and it was very daunting. And that's exactly how I started. So we started with GitHub, because GitHub's documentation is pretty good for the actions that you do. I also then decided to just do all these actions myself and just generate those audit logs. Don't recommend it. Right? Because it takes a lot of time. And going back, I would maybe do that if I want to understand a particular behavior. But my intention for doing that and actually creating that noise was to see, all right, if I perform this action, what is the alert? Or what is the text that I need to alert on? Or whatever that kind of logic is. A lot of the work has already been done for you. Because, again, if you're building out a pipeline, you're probably starting from scratch. And there's probably companies who've built similar product, if not similar products, but they've built their infrastructure. And one of the big lessons that I learned is there are libraries out there which have already done that. Some of them are by vendors, so you may need to take those with a grain of salt with your environment. And I talk about it in my talk as well. There's Elastic has a pretty cool library for detection rules. Splunk has a pretty cool library. Sigma is something that I really love, Sigma, the open format. They have a pretty cool library. Some of it also depends on the community. So Sigma, for example, there's a lot of people contributing to it. It's not the solution for everything, right? It's not the magic wand that I'm going to give you, but it's a good start. It is very specific to individual systems. So you may have to add your own, but there's a good start for at least a base. when you start building out your pipeline, you need alerts to say, okay, cool, what's happening? So that's one way you should go. We spoke about AWS.
Yes.
AWS has a very interesting tool or service called Guard Duty.
Yes.
There's a lot of debate about Guard Duty in the industry, but at the very least,
you have a starting point.
You have a starting point. It's doing a lot of the work for you. Not putting the cost of the service and everything into this discussion, which is a...
Or even config for that matter, though, it's going to be quite expensive.
AWS config is annoying me right now, let's just say.
Oh, fair. The reason I was asking that was because it's almost, as people build these use cases and they find simple examples to do this, there is a question to be asked about how do you scale this across multiple AWS accounts? And at the same time, how do you know it's time to, like a 0 day comes in? So first question, how do you scale this? And how do you add more and make it like a seamless process to keep adding more as a well-oiled machine for whatever?
So this is actually where, again, when I mentioned, like, this is one of the things that we want to continuously do. This is where I would actually take the help of the teams that I mentioned, like infra team, product teams, because they're good at designing these systems, right? Let's face it, I am not the best system design person. The system is already designed. I will threat model it because I can do that, but I am not the first guy you go to design a system. For that particular use case, right, your SRE org, your infrastructure org deals with this exact problem every day. That is one of their cornerstones, right? What we're doing, and again, because of our relations with them, is we're asking them, saying, hey, I'm concerned about my export webhook to my particular workflow or automation platform. I'm concerned that it's going to be too much load if I add more alerts or if I add more log sources. How have you solved that? Your data pipeline, how have you solved that? We have a data team who does this literally for a living. Hey, observability and telemetry from other sources comes to you guys. How have you solved that? We have this system. Can you help us? Right? It's an ongoing conversation. But I would say if you already have those things, definitely go and approach them. And sometimes, like, you just can't do it yourself.
Fair.
You may need to onboard a tool. There's I'm a big believer of, hey, if you can do it yourself.
So scaling, do it yourself?
Scaling depends on your company, but get help. Because there are teams in your org which probably understand the type of scale, like the 100 accounts that you mentioned. That's a scale that myself, I don't know how to solve that now. But I know for a fact my infrastructure team will be able to handle the resiliency aspect of it. They'll be able to advise me at least on, hey, this is what we did when we built it out. You will experience similar problems, load, maybe your collector goes down because there's just too many logs coming in, right? We actually had a very interesting example, which we have a custom internal tool, right? And the logs from that are not the easiest to get. And that the team which handles that has their own kind of logging mechanism. So they have 2-week logging and then they have archiving logging. So when we were trying to ingest that into our SIEM, it was very difficult because we tried to ingest every hour, or the ingestion timeline was pretty large. And the collector used to just say, oh, this is too many logs. And then it used to just not work. So that's a problem where we went back to the team and saying, hey, guys, can we then put those alerts in your pipeline and just send us the alerts instead of the actual log set? It is not the best solution, but until we can figure out how to get their logs into our pipeline, that is how we're solving for that.
Sure. And this is an interesting one as well because a lot of people may already have on-premise environments. How do you translate that into this cloud native world? Because a lot of the things you called out are very API. It's also easy to have API be automate a lot of that stuff as well. Maybe some Gen AI in there as well to help you build detection around it. For people who are transitioning from an on-premise world to a cloud world, how easy is that transition to do? And what are some? Do you have some thoughts on the whole process as well?
Yeah, so the actual digital transformation, I don't think I am the best person to talk about the complexity there because there's articles and on articles on, there's so much data on that. In terms of the actual detection and the security side of it, it's a pretty different threat model. To give you an example, if I have an on-premise system, I'll be worried about, hey, is there malware on here? That would be the first thing I look for. When it comes to the cloud, and again, I am worried about malware and those things, obviously. But I am also now concerned about attack behavior and attack, the chain. For example, hey, someone gets access to my developer account. I would be concerned on that and on-prem as well. But in the cloud, okay, cool. They got access to that. I now need to know, are they put list objects, get objects, put objects, the data events, which sometimes you don't really look that deep.
Yeah.
But if the job of that particular developer or whatever product that they're developing or feature or service is just to get objects, and there's 50 or 100 or 300 get objects, but then there's like a list object, which is a different object.
Yep.
That's something that you really need to alert on. In an on-premise environment, you may not really need to go that deep. It might just be like, okay, is there any malware on this? And that kind of flags it because you're on-premise, right?
Yeah.
Again, that's one example. There's countless ones in AWS and even in SaaS deployments in general.
Yeah.
That threat modeling is completely different.
Yeah.
Another really interesting thing is just the dynamic resources, which is fun. And I actually read about something similar. A couple of weeks ago about, hey, crypto miners, right?
Yeah.
Someone did something and deployed a crypto miner for 90 seconds. Now, 90 seconds, if your telemetry ingest is 5 minutes, forget 5 minutes, even if it's 2 minutes, you won't catch this.
No.
It's literally 90 seconds, right?
Yeah.
Again, if you might catch some part of it, but that changes things because you may not be able to even know that happened, right?
Yeah.
The dynamic nature of these resources makes it very complex, right? So not only do you need to have good visibility into, okay, how is this done at your company? You also, this again goes back to my initial point of, hey, you need to talk to your teams because maybe for them it's normal, right?
Yeah.
If they want to do some sort of processing and they just okay, we're just going to spin up an EC2 instance, quickly do this and then close it down. That is an attacker behavior, right? It's literally an attacker behavior, but it might actually be something that the team is doing for a particular use case, right?
Yeah.
And you have to understand that. You don't have to shut it down, but maybe for, hey, service A, or for coming from the AWS, I don't know, dev role, data eng team, or whatever that team is, anyone with that role doing that, it's their job.
Yep.
And that's how you tune your detections, right? Okay, I'm going to alert on any resource that gets created and deleted in, let's say, an hour or 2 hours.
Okay.
That would give you at least a starting point.
Yep.
But then this particular example that I gave, those would be the false positives. And if they do it every day, then you need to fix that.
So what do you put as milestones then? Because almost to your point, it could also become an exercise where it may seem like there's no end. You can keep adding detection one after the other.
Yeah.
Like we have moved from on-premise to cloud, or you are gone cloud to multi-cloud. What's the, I guess, if you were to think about this from a milestone perspective, because that allows people to go, okay, my first project is I need to identify my important applications where the log sources are. What are some of those stages that you recommend people can look out for as they start building their detection response pipeline that can be helpful for them, especially if they're starting today?
That's a great question because it's essentially no end.
Yeah.
Like security operations, there's no end.
Yeah.
Unless, God forbid, company shuts down, I think even then there's no end.
Yeah.
But the first milestone is exactly what you said. Identify the log sources you want to ingest. I would say second milestone is figure out a way to ingest them because it's not always going to be easy.
Yep.
We used APIs. There's an example of GitHub where you have to create that. You have to export those logs into a bucket and have your SIEM read from the bucket.
Yep.
Cloudflare was a difficult one for us because we had to create log push jobs from Cloudflare to S3. And it was not easy. It was a little difficult for us to do that. I think now it's easier with their log push v2 or whatnot, but that is something which was tricky. The custom application that I told you about, that was even more trickier because we could not do that. So we pivoted and we put the alerts on their system. So once you've identified those applications, you have to figure out, A, is it easy to ingest all of them? And B, if it's not easy, how do I solve for that? So now you have those logs that you've identified, they're in your SIEM or wherever, and you have a good handle on them. Then the third milestone is actually putting those initial detections or the alerts or just the things to look out for these applications and sources. We spoke about the libraries. Maybe you can take it an app at a time. Maybe you can take it all at a time. But the next milestone is that. Now, along with that milestone, I would say something maybe that you should do in parallel is figure out a way to get those alerts to you, which is the notification side. We're either through Slack. So we have a notification priority, which I also spoke about in my talk. If you can link that up.
I would also.
Which basically is, hey, every alert is not the same. We spoke about GitHub, just to give you an example. If I'm deleting a repository, that's a pretty big thing. But if, I don't know, I'm bypassing branch protections, it is a big thing. but maybe it's a repository which kind of does not make sense. And another milestone is the prioritization aspect, and context aspect, which I think needs to be done after these things.
Okay.
So the notification of, hey, when do you get that? And also, what is your response step? And the crux of it, are you A, equipped to know what to do?
Yeah.
B, once you know what to do, can you do it?
Yeah.
Right? One of the things that we have seen, and it's a big challenge, is do you have the access to fix it yourself? Oftentimes the answer is no.
Yeah.
So then you need to identify what is the process to invoke the team who can do this.
Yep.
We were lucky enough that we had pre-built on-call rotations. We had some of those automations in place where we can just ping the team on call to say, hey, take a look at this, it's urgent.
Yeah.
Not everyone has that.
Yeah.
So maybe you need to A, find out the team who owns that code or that resource. Then you have to know, okay, do they have an on-call rotation? B, what is their standard process? So that is another milestone.
Okay.
But just to provide another perspective here, I think these should be going in parallel.
Oh,
right?
okay. But as a single person doing all this in parallel?
As a single person, yes, doing all this in parallel. And the reason for that is your detection pipeline. You can ingest everything,
Yeah.
but there's no point if you don't know how to respond. There's no point if you don't know the alerts.
Yeah.
And every SIEM has a different costing.
Yep.
If you're putting all the sources in there, you're going to rack up the cost. If you have too many alerts in the second column, you're not going to sleep. Like the Goldilocks principle of, hey, how much is enough? That is a real thing. It's in cognitive science. It also kind of applies here because if you alert too much, what are you going to do? You're not going to sleep. And if you don't alert, you're going to be like, oh, the world is great, as we're the most secure company, and there's actually a breach going on.
Yeah.
So that's why I'm like, take it slow. Identify your P0s in what we call it P0s, tier 1 applications, critical ones. Don't make them a 35 applications list. Make them 1, 2, 5, and start with that. Start very slow, because before you know it, it's going to get overwhelming.
Yep.
And the answer to the overwhelmingness is automation.
That's a good piece of advice. And those are all the technical questions I had. I've got 3 fun questions for you as well. First one being, what do you spend your time on when you're now trying to solve the detection response pipeline challenge?
At Lime or just in general in life?
Could be in general in life as well.
That's a great question. I like just to explore other things. I'm really into music. I play football. I work out. I just try to be active and out there. So I live in London and it's a lot of fun, right? There's a lot to do. I like to keep myself busy. I'm fortunate enough that I live in a city where a lot of these things are accessible. Sometimes I meet friends or I really enjoy food. I go out for dinner and things like that. But I also like to keep updated on a few things that are happening, just to keep myself relevant, I think, with not just security, but in general. In my house, there's always music playing. So if Spotify has a leaderboard or something, I'll probably be quite high up there.
You walk in, there's a Spotify build.
It's just continuous. Even if I'm not there, it's just going on. So my neighbors might just be like, this man never leaves his house. But yeah, having been fortunate enough to live in New York, Mumbai, Pune, and like great places where this is a lot to do, I need to slow down a little bit sometimes. And I just enjoy doing so many different things, meeting different people. It's a lot of fun.
That's awesome. And the second question, what is something that you're proud of that is not on your social media?
I'm a pretty public person, unfortunately. What am I proud of that is not in my social media? I've been cooking quite a lot more. I really enjoy cooking, and I kind of lost that, oh wow, I want to cook more in the middle because I was doing all these cool meals that used to come in. And they're good for the reasons that they're good for. But I got an expensive pan, an expensive knife. Didn't need it at all. And that kind of led me to be like, hey, dude, you spend so much money on a knife and a pan. You need to cook more. So I don't post that on social media, but I've really been getting into cooking some fun stuff.
Which is a great segue into my third question, which is, what's your favorite cuisine or restaurant that you can share? Or maybe what favorite food you've made that you've learned?
Favorite food I've made. So I hate following recipes. It's this, I don't know where it comes from.
Just go with the feel.
Maybe it's like the Indian in me who's seen like my mom just kill it every time with just, oh yeah, this needs more salt.
Yeah.
And I'm just always like, how do you know this?
Yeah.
But I try to follow a recipe sometimes and I get bored and I just add some of my own things and it ends up tasting pretty decent.
Yeah.
My fiance doesn't complain so far. But I would say there's a lot of favorite restaurants. I'll give one in London because it's relevant to us. There's a restaurant near Borough Market. I know it's not in Borough Market. It's called Rambutan. It's a Sri Lankan spot. It's really cool. I really like it. I go there. I spent a lot of money in their place. It's like countertop seating. You see what they make.
Oh, wow.
And it's just a nice vibe. There's a restaurant in New York, which I'm sure everyone in the world knows now. It's called Atomics.
Okay.
It was a very special meal for me and my fiance, but it's a great time. So I would say those two of different kind of levels in different cities.
So one in New York and one in London. That's awesome. Thanks for sharing that as well.
For sure.
Where can people find you on the internet to talk more about your talk and everything else you've been working on?
Yeah, so I'm on LinkedIn. I'm pretty, unfortunately, active on LinkedIn. So if they follow me on LinkedIn, they will see a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
I think the talk is going to be on the B-Sides page, if I'm not wrong.
Yeah, it will be on live stream as well.
But
and I'll link it anyways in the show notes as well, so people can actually catch it. But thanks so much for coming on the show, man.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you so much,
Thank you for
guys.
watching, everyone. See you next time. Thank you so much for listening and watching this episode of Cloud Security Podcast. If you've been enjoying content like this, you can find more episodes like these on www.cloudsecuritypodcast.tv. We are also publishing these episodes on social media as well, so you can definitely find these episodes there. Oh, by the way, just in case there was interest in learning about AI cybersecurity, we also have a sister podcast called AI Cybersecurity Podcast, which may be of interest as well. I'll leave the links in the description for you to check them out. And also for our weekly newsletter, where we do an in-depth analysis of different topics within cloud security, ranging from identity, endpoint, all the way up to what is the CNAP or whatever a new acronym that comes out tomorrow. Thank you so much for supporting, listening, and watching. I'll see you next time.